say in modern tapping stems from Jung, famous Swiss psychoanalyst and psychiatrist, and his work together with the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli, because they both have this kind of strange experiences, strange coincidences. So their theory was at least Jung went back to the alchemistic concept of unus mundus, that behind all the diverse phenomena, there is a unity in the world. And also that was supported by Pauli's say view in physics, and also his own experiences. And well, it's of course difficult to explain, because what is really the problem here is what I said, that we have not reached a good explanatory model for consciousness yet. But they thought that somehow these phenomena were organized from the subconscious. Then it's kind of parallel activity. If you have, for instance, see thunderstorm, you will have rolling thunder, and you will have see flashing lights. Both are expression of the same electric discharges, one as sound, the other as light. And in a similar way, you have say movements deep down in the subconscious that will manifest both physically and psychologically. So if you, for instance, have a very strong dream about meeting a person, and you go out next morning and you meet exactly that person, somehow there is a connection there below the surface. And it's very difficult to explain how this works. And Jung and Pauli have made a book together where they try to explain that. But at least if you say organized from the subconscious, I think that is say good start to approach these phenomena.
Right. So the thing about synchronicity is that it is a meaningful coincidence. And in that respect, virtually all of the experiments that are done in psi phenomena are exercises in controlling meaningful coincidences. So synchronicity is often thought about as being completely spontaneous, which in the real world, that's the way it is. But we control this spontaneity in the laboratory. Otherwise, we would never see these phenomena show up. So in the real world, psychic phenomena in general tend to be spontaneous, but the whole point of doing it in the laboratory is that then you're able to answer the question, is it a mere coincidence or is it something more than coincidence? And that's where we know that in some cases, these very strange synchronicities that occur are not coincidences. There's actually something more going on, something more interesting.
And that's statistically significant, correct? I mean, what you
highly
found.
significant, yes. Yeah, and it is also true that some people are much more talented than others. So, but what else is new?
Just a comment there. Jung often observed in his analytical practice that when people are deeply engaged in, say, existential questions, these things tend to appear, because then you're somehow really see engaging the whole of your being. And if you see formulated in the language of energy, you activate lots more of say the energy of consciousness. If there's existential, say, a crisis or a deep question, a scientific or personal, you really must somehow try to solve, then you have a tendency to generate these phenomena. So it's and therefore, say, a guy like Wolfgang Pauli, this Nobel Prize winner, he was very, of course, deep into this his search for insight as a physicist, but also existentially. And then he reports of lots of strange coincidences in his life. So, as I said, a personal engagement and will tend to somehow generate these phenomena more. And if you are just, say, what is called Terje, hjälp mig, likgyldig. What is the word? Likgyldig. Indifferent. If you're indifferent to yourself and the world around you, these phenomena do not so often occur as if you have a very strong engagement. Yeah.
Actually,
Gentlemen,
see,
Penelope B has her
But
hand raised. She's been dying to ask you guys a question. So Penelope, would you like to ask your question? And then I have a few other questions from everybody else to ask you gentlemen when you have a moment. You're doing brilliantly. This is so fascinating and fun to watch and listen to.
Thanks.
Okay, I was wondering, does the double slit experiment have anything to do with all this in the way that we can observe and change particles and the way they move?
Dean.
well, I think so. I think the answer is yes. We've done a series of now 19 experiments using an optical double slit system as a target to ask people to direct their attention towards the double slit and then use their intention to see if they could get information out of the system, which you would, in a physics experiment, you want to get what's called which path information. It's which of the two slits that a photon goes through. So if you do that by looking at it, that's one form of gaining information. But in our experiment, we asked people to use clairvoyance to imagine that they could get information about the movement of a photon. So we know from physics that if you gain any information about the behavior of the photons, and their behavior will change. So we did that experiment, and the experiments show overall pretty clear evidence that the mind alone, through clairvoyance, can interact with photons in a way to make them behave a little bit less wave-like and a little bit more particle-like. So the short answer is yes, the double slit experiment is then relevant to these kinds of phenomena.
So how does that apply to psychic ability? The ability to, the ability of electrons to move according to how we observe, or when we observe them, how does that apply to psychic ability?
Well, for one thing, it demonstrates that clairvoyance can apparently work down to the level of photons. So you can gain information from the extremely small to the extremely large. Apparently, size doesn't matter. The other thing is that it suggests that there's something about consciousness that interacts directly with the material world. And so in the first case, we're talking about psychic perception. And in the second case, we're talking about what we can call it psychic action or psychokinetic effects. So both of those are hidden within the mystery of, in the physics world, you'd call them quantum measurement problem. It has two elements in it. One's about perception, the other one's about action. These are all happening down at the level of photons, which are pretty darn small, but nevertheless, it's directly relevant to what we experience in an everyday sense as humans.
Gentlemen, we have another question that came in from Mary Virginia Becker. She says, I would just like to add that there are academics who are writing about the end of materialism. Charles Tart, PhD, and also people at UVA. So maybe if the worldview starts moving away from materialism or physicalism, there will be more acceptance of paranormal. And that's just the Division of Perceptual Studies, UVA.
Yeah, that's the University of Virginia. Just Saturday or Friday and Saturday, there was a big seminar talking about what the current word is post-materialism, post-materialist science. I don't like that word post-materialism because it's a promissory note. You know, whenever you start talking about after this, well, we don't know what that is. A philosopher would say, well, the opposite of materialism is idealism. Everything is based in consciousness. We're not using that term. I don't know exactly why, but nevertheless, the idea of post-materialist sciences is now something that is being taken seriously.
That's perfect. And so we just had one other question that came in. She says, I'm just trying to find it. My apologies, gentlemen. My link just went a little crazy. Here we go. Can you practice your psychic abilities and get better at tapping into the mental internet?
Can you, I think I heard it, but can you just repeat so I'm sure?
Sure. This is from Fiona. She says, can you practice your psychic abilities and get better at tapping into the mental internet?
Well, that is at least the experience of many in the esoteric societies, because they have, there are several of them have training programs to develop that, and also experienced meditators. I read a book by Lawrence LeChan. I think some of you may know him. I don't know if he's alive, but he is, would be about 90 years now, and he's running a meditation course, and he says it's not a question about if those phenomena will occur if you're a long-time meditator. It's a question about when. So clearly sharpening your consciousness, getting more sensitive, more aware, training of awareness will help you say expand your consciousness to say detect more of the movements on the mental internet. Yes.
Right. Lawrence LeChan passed away a few weeks ago. I think he was
Oh.
104 years old.
I got to
How
interview
old
him a
was-
couple of years ago.
How old was he?
I think 104.
Oh,
Wow.
jeez.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry to hear that.
Mm. I had some email exchanges with him some years back. Yes.
Terje, you have also been talking about some different practical implications of using PSI effects, like in the military and also in archaeology. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Well, Dean, of course, knows quite a lot more than me than about these things as well. But some archaeologists had used these, say, abilities with quite great success. Most famous, perhaps, was the leader of the Canadian Archaeologist Society, Dr. Norman Emerson. He used a psychic called George McMullen. And Emerson is often called the father of scientific archaeology in Canada. And he found that McMullen was correct when trying to locate, say, villages and different kind of things he searched for in about 80% of the times. And Emerson can not easily be dismissed. He also founded an archaeological journal and has written quite a lot about these things. So that is very interesting. Also, Stefan Schwartz have done a very interesting research based on psychics. He did some excavation in the 80s in Egypt, in Alexandria, where they did some quite astonishing finds, amongst other things, the palace of Cleopatra. So that is quite exciting also. So these two things, these two gentlemen, Norman Emerson and Stefan Schwartz, you can read what they have written about if you're interested in that theme. For this military, it's of course the project Stargate, and I think Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ would be perhaps the most natural first place to start, because they were physicists involved in this project run from about 1975 to 1995, where the American military tried to use and train psychic spies to detect, say, behind the Iron Curtain installations and different kind of military activity, and with some great success also. So yes, there's a practical aspect to these phenomena as well. But as I said, I think also on a personal level, to take better decision, should I apply for this job or that job? Should I hang out with this person or that with that person? Somehow information is there. So why don't you tap into it and use it productively in your own life? I would suggest that. And that, as I said, is the experience from the esoteric traditions also, that it is possible to somehow hone your skills in this field.
And it helps to have talent.
Of course, of course.
So-
I compare very often with musicality. Some people can be Beethoven, or say only Beethoven can be Beethoven, but everybody can learn to sing for their own pleasure, and they can even become quite good to sing, even if they are not getting Beethoven. So yes, talent and training combined.
Right. A third area of application of these abilities is healing. So
Yes.
we've done studies with 17 different modalities of healing. The popular ones are Reiki, therapeutic touch, but there's many, many others, shamanistic training, all kinds of things. What we have found is that in virtually every case, the healers might be close to the clients, like within arm's reach. Sometimes they touch them, sometimes they don't. But all of them also say that they can heal from a distance. So somebody who can heal within arm's reach, you can imagine that there's bioelectromagnetics or some local effect going on. But if you can do Reiki at a distance, it's not any of the normal forces anymore. It's something quite different that is much more similar to a psychic effect. So and when you look at the alternative healing methods, it's worth billions of dollars. That's how much is being spent by people for these kinds of healings all around the world, by professionals who do this sort of thing. So it's not a microscopic form of application, a psychic phenomena. It's something that's being used all the time by a lot of people around the world for a very pragmatic reason, that somebody who's talented at it as a healer, it tends to work.
I also have written a bit about the use of psychics. For instance, people in finance and other kinds. They often use psychics, as you have experienced with the scientists. They often don't talk about it, but they do it even the same. And this old guy I was talking about, who told me about this lady, how tall she was. I asked him about, have you talked with some famous politician? Of course I have. And and some famous finance people. Yes, of course I have. And he ended up, you wouldn't believe if I told everybody I have talked to. So apart from healing, also the psychic advisor, or what you could call me, is very much, it's a million dollar industry. For good and for bad.
So think of the paradox here, that sometimes we would think that, well, if only somebody could come up with an application of psychic phenomena, well, then we would believe it. But there are applications. People still don't believe it. So as you were saying before, that your worldview is a way of perceiving the world, but it has blinders. You can see that, but you can't see what's going on over here, even if that's quite real.
My impression is also, because we are speaking, when we refer to physicists, we very often refer to, say, the Anglo-American sphere. But my perception is that if you go to France, for instance, the two of the great French quantum physicists, Costa de Beauregard and also d'Espagnat, I think they were both pupils of de Broglie, who had working together with Erwin Schrödinger, or at least done theoretical work together with Schrödinger. But both d'Espagnat and de Beauregard were quite convinced that these phenomena are real, and also tried to make models. But I think d'Espagnat published, I think it was in 1989, a quite substantial article in Scientific American about this. So that might be a part of this blinders. We have this Anglo-American field, and then we have the French that might look quite differently on something. And also in Germany, you have Walter von Lucadou. He had an office connected to the university in Freiburg. I think he's retired now, but there you could consult him. He is both a doctor in physics and also doctor in psychology. And he had a kind of a directorate where you can consult him on poltergeist. If you have problems with poltergeist, you come home and your living room is totally turned upside down. And you go to the insurance company and you demand some compensation, and they say no, because this you have done yourself, and you swear I have not done it myself, I was on holiday, but the insurance company say we don't believe you. Then you can go to Walter von Lucandou and get his wise advice whether or not this likely is caused by poltergeist. And he had salary from what is called the Delstat, the state, for doing this work in connection with the University of Freiburg. So it's a kind of application with the blessing from the authorities that we do not have in Norway, and I suppose you don't have it in the US.
No, we don't like it in the US because it's hard to get poltergeists to pay for damage.
Yeah, they are quite hard on money, I understand.
Yeah.
Is there, do you think there's hope? The one thing that concerns me is, even though there are these bright spots, or even the work Dr. Parnia has done on near-death experiences, or Jim B. Tucker on University of Virginia again on reincarnation, are there enough of these, in Dr. Radin's work certainly, are there enough of these kind of little pinpoints of hope, of research in these areas, that it can grow more to the fore, where, we're not having the same conversation in 20 years, when will science start looking at this seriously? Do you think we're on the road to being there, where, quote, the mainstream will start to entertain this more?
On the show I did with you a couple of weeks ago, Jim, I referred to a very important article by Professor Etzel Cardenia. He is professor in psychology tenured at Lund University in Sweden, which is quite highly ranked in the world, in World Connection. And in 2018, in the May issue of American Psychologist, which is the most prestigious journal in the world for psychology, he published an article called "The Experimental Evidence for Parapsychological Phenomena." And of course, they care quite a lot about their good name, so they letting him in with this article, that speaks volumes. So for me, that was very, I was quite astonished by that, and it's an excellent article, by the way. So they would never have accepted that article unless they seriously consider that he might be right.
Gentlemen,
Right.
you guys have had a few questions come in. I just wanted to ask you this one that came in from Claudio. The U.S. Army is researching telepathic brain signal communication tech for soldiers. They will be able to communicate silently, and this could change operations on the ground. Could you comment on the U.S. Army research led by the University of Southern California with a $6.5 million for separating brain signals that influence action or behavior from signals that do not?
I think Dean should be commenting on that, because he's the expert there.
Yeah, notice that the word is in telepathy, or telepathic, is in quotes, because it's not telepathy. It's the brain-computer interface. It's very standard neuroscience, and they're taking advantage of the fact that thoughts are correlated with brain activity. So what they're talking about is sometimes called synthetic telepathy, a technological way of deciphering brain signals to figure out, to a limited extent, what somebody is thinking about. That's completely different than real telepathy, because real telepathy is not electromagnetic, and it doesn't involve anything to do with detecting brain signals. It's something quite different.
This one just came in from Kyle. Do attitudes towards understanding the paranormal from a scientific viewpoint differ in non-Western cultures? That's really interesting. Good question, Kyle.
So I have an answer there too. If you go into the Western world, Europe, United States, maybe other mainly English-speaking countries, you find pretty much the same kind of education. You find the same kind of taboo about talking about these topics. You go into Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, completely different cultures that are way more accepting. In fact, when I've lectured in India, I would talk about what we do in the laboratory to study things like telepathy. And in one case, I gave a talk for a university department that was studying cognitive neuroscience. And so I talked about telepathy and how we test for it. And then I asked them, is this something that you would want to study? You have all the right equipment for it. And they said, no. So I said, well, why not? I said, well, we completely accept it, but telepathy is not part of the curriculum of cognitive neuroscience. So there's no place to put it into our curriculum. But they had complete acceptance of the idea. So some cultures that are highly accepting of these kinds of phenomena don't even bother to study them because they don't see what's the point. We already know that they're real. So we have kind of a paradox here. Then in the societies that are very skeptical about this, we keep studying it again and again and again to try to prove that it exists. And then cultures that accept it, they don't even see why you'd want to even bother to do that.
I will also add to what Dean said there that Sony, the electronics giant, did some years of study into psi. And they also concluded that, yes, these are real effects, but they do not have any commercial value for our company. So we just put them on ice. Again, it was not controversial that these things existed. It was just we don't have any use for them.
Right. Yeah, and I have to say, I need to leave in about 10 minutes.
Oh,
yes.
No.
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I have one more question, and then I am happy to take one more, just two more, and then I would love to wrap you guys up, just because I don't want to go over our time limit too much for the event. Okay. So one of our attendees wrote in, Dr. Radin, to say, to ask you a little bit more about electromagnetic energy used in healing. Is this the magnetic energy one can feel between their hands? And how does that work?
Right. So-called energy medicine, which includes sometimes also called subtle energies, Reiki, healing, therapeutic touch, and so on. The word energy used is not what a physicist talks about in terms of energy. This is one of the problems with the use of the term energy medicine. The energy that people talk about is felt energy, what they feel happening in their bodies. By the same token, when a lot of people talk about feeling vibrations and frequencies, and they're using terms from engineering and science that have nothing to do with engineering or science, and it tends to make them angry. What they're talking about is you feel vibrations, you feel something that is analogous to energetics, but it's not that. And so psychic phenomena are definitely not electromagnetic. And as best as we can tell, most of the healing practices that go on have nothing to do with electromagnetics, for the very simple reason is that we use instruments to try to detect these strong surges of something that people feel, and you pick up nothing. So it's not any conventionally known force. Even the word force may not even be correct.
So gentlemen, the last question that I have is actually going to be my own. You all have been absolutely fantastic, and we are so beyond grateful that you guys took the time to come on this call tonight and have this conversation with us, and we're all learning a great deal more. Now, in addition to Terje's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything Paranormal, what are some things that people could do, who are novices, beginners to, learning about the world of the paranormal, to improve and better educate themselves, to dive deeper into all of the different areas that are outlined in Terje's brilliant book?
Terje, har du lyst til å si noe om det? Terje, would you comment on that question?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I'm the right person to comment on it. I think Terje should comment himself. But I just have to say that, as I mentioned in the start of this event, that if you want to learn something about parapsychology, this is probably the best book available. So I just want to leave it at that. And I want to thank Terje again for doing an enormous job. It's an incredible book. It's a good read and everything. So thank you for what you've done, Terje.
Thank you for supporting me during the way also. Jim, Dean, you want to comment on the last question?
Well, whenever I'm asked, how do I improve my psychic abilities? I say, well, there are many historical ways of doing this. You could take certain psychedelics, a little bit dangerous. So the safest and historically most effective way is meditation.
Yeah. And Jim?
Well, I would recommend reading Mr. Simonson's book. I agree fully. I think that is a great primer and will get you in the field. There's a lot of great things to read, including things Dr. Radin has done indeed. And a little bit, I will invite people to listen to my podcasts. Just look up Jim Harold wherever you listen to your podcasts. But there's a ton of great stuff to read out there. I think sometimes there's almost too much information, and separating the wheat from the chaff is difficult these days because there is so much. So again, Mr. Simonson's book, I would highly recommend it. That would get you started in a good footing.
I can't disagree with you.
Yeah, I would also agree that as a place to start, and especially this should be given as Christmas presents to young people.
Exactly.
Right? Because it's a fun read as well, which is important. Otherwise, they're going to put the book down. So
exactly. And when they have read this book, they can go over to reading Dean's books.
Or maybe even some of the journal articles, of which there are thousands out there.
Oh.
Wonderful. Thank you guys all so much for attending. This has been so much fun. And I, for one, have learned a great deal. This has been profoundly wonderful. And I will send a link to everybody who joined us tonight. I put a link in the chat for you to purchase the book, no matter where you are in the world. And I will follow up with an additional link. And if you guys would like to purchase the book directly from Watkins, I will also provide you with a link for a 20% discount plus shipping to buy directly from us. So the book's available globally through Penguin Random House. And if you're in the UK, you can buy it directly from us at watkins.com. Great. Thank you guys so much.
Okay. Thank you for hosting us.
I have done very little. I am just a fly on the wall in this beautiful sea of tremendous icons. We've been very privileged to have the four of you guys today. And we're very proud of this book. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Bye-bye. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.